Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this episode of Threat Talk. Now, there's always a lot to learn and a lot to stay on top of for any cybersecurity professional. And to help with this, in addition to podcasts, webinars, online courses, conferences, etc., there are also online communities that can serve as a very unique source of information and a unique type of network beyond that which you might have on LinkedIn or in other organizations or other social media. Now, I'm your host, Bob Hansmann. Today, we have with us the community manager for Infoblox, Sunil Amana, to help us understand the difference between different types of communities, different types of members, and this is the more important part, the best ways to ensure that we're going to get the most out of any community you choose to join. So thanks for joining us, Sunil.
Thank you, Bob, for having me on the podcast. I'm happy to tell people more about the Infoblox online community.
Well, I'd like to start out by just on the higher level. I mean, communities, they've evolved quite a bit over time. So today, what are we thinking of as a community? I mean, there's different types, right? I mean, there's the casual ones and so forth.
Yeah, right. What we're talking about here today is an online community where people from across the globe can digitally engage each other. Community is a place where people can connect, build networks, and discuss topics that are of mutual interest to them. So I know when I first got my job at Infoblox, a friend said, "Say hi to Ingmar for me." And I asked how he knew Ingmar, and he said they never met him in person, but they met through an online community. People are connecting online these days with others that have similar interests. It's a thing.
Now, I know for like tech support problems, I would go to like a forum or just a bulletin board, search through their knowledge base. How is this different? I mean, it's a lot more interactive, right?
Yeah, it is. So you can have some communities that are pretty basic. They're hosted on something as simple as a Slack channel, where members can post comments and questions and others can respond. Or you can have a community that offers a lot more, like our online community. So for example, we have multiple discussion forums covering networking and security topics, as well as Infoblox products and solutions. We also have a general announcement board where we can announce upcoming webinars and product releases. We have a tech video section with demo videos from our tech marketing engineers. We have links to thought leadership blogs, and the website also has a list of trending support articles. So you can have a really basic community or one that's very broad and deep like ours.
Well, and I like the way you outlined that, because it goes everywhere from the very product specific stuff that only a customer would care about to some of the thought leadership type stuff that anybody in security might care about. So there's a lot of breadth there. And I guess while I'm laying out, the different kind of users, some that are there for thought leadership and some that are there for tips and tricks. So there's members, you're the manager. And I saw an email recently where you were talking about the super users that you got. What are the different roles that somebody might have on a community outside of the trolls we sometimes run across in social media and other communities? What are the different roles that a member might have?
Sure. So a community has several roles, as you mentioned. So I'll go through a couple of them. So I'm the website community manager, and my role as a manager is to design, manage, and build awareness about the community. So on a daily basis, I moderate the discussion boards, post content, get rid of spam, and escalate unanswered questions to subject matter experts. Being a community manager is pretty cool. I get to help see our customers interact directly with each other, working with each other to solve problems real time. It's one of the better jobs I've had. And then you have the members of the community. You have different types. You have readers. They're just a lot of visitors to the community who might do a Google search on a generic term like IPv6, and one of our blogs may pop up. So they simply are directed to our online community. They'll read content such as the blogs or discussion posts to enhance their knowledge and learn from their peers and other Infoblox employees. We have writers, and they play a really key role. They add content such as blogs and answer questions and posts based on their experience and expertise. And then we have super users. So every 6 months, we identify our super users on the community site. These are members that contribute by sharing their knowledge at a really high level, by posting a lot in the discussion forums and authoring replies to posts. We especially appreciate the super user contributions. And so we try to reward them with Infoblox branded swag and invitations to special events. such as executive and subject matter expert discussions. And yeah, we do have trolls. They do things like post spam links to websites they're trying to drive traffic to, or some people misbehave. But as a moderator, my job is to look for that bad behavior and address it. I can tell you in general, our community members are really polite and very well behaved. So there's hardly any drama I need to deal with from trolls.
Yeah, that drama part can definitely make your job a mess. And you mentioned, the writers, and I wanted to point out that again, one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation with you in particular is that I belong to a number of communities. I've mentioned on the podcast before that I do a lot of gaming. I belong to a lot of gaming communities and stuff. And the best ones are the ones where different members go out of their way to produce content, articles, and information that everybody can use. And you have a lot of people who do that. And to supplement that, I know that you actually even hire people to produce content to fill in gaps, to make sure that the breadth, because you keep mentioning breadth, and I think that's, again, the value here. The breadth of information that you produce, you want to make sure there's always something there for everybody who might have DNS security concerns or just questions.
Yeah, that's right, Bob. We have some guest bloggers. We want to make sure that the content is fresh and relevant and about current topics. And so in addition to our employees who blog, we have guest bloggers. So we have a lot of good content in the blogs especially.
Well, and you mentioned the content. That's where I want to get into next. And at this point, warning to the listeners, we're going to go specifically into the Infoblox community. But again, we're going to highlight the breadth of information that a community can provide. Again, we mentioned tech support type forums and communities that are just about troubleshooting and things like that. But you get into other things. But the first category because you've got lots of different categories, and I know that's one of the things you manage, is you actually sometimes have to group things together. You define how this stuff gets grouped. And while you have different categories, some of them I put into just the bucket of these are the things to help people troubleshoot the product or get the most out of the product. It's very product specific stuff. And I guess that's pretty common for a vendor community, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you have people who will put up posts about a topic they just want to generate a discussion about. And as you mentioned, most of the posts are fairly product specific about our products and how to use them. Some of the posts are very technical and get down and dirty to help our members with a problem that they're having with the products. We do have a lot of kind of posts that are about best practices, and we span the variety of different kind of posts. There's something for everybody. There's a lot of great content in the discussion boards.
Well, on the best practices, I wanted to talk about that a bit, because you not only just are posting stuff, you actually do webinars for the community in those kinds of areas. You mentioned there's like access to videos for product demos and feature demos and how to do demos and things like that. But that's all like recorded content that you're just linking to. But you actually generate and drive the development of webinars for this community, right?
Yeah, we absolutely do. So if you look at our products and solutions, you can have some users that are using our DNS, DHCP, and IP address management product. They can add to that our security offering to have a better overall solution. And then they can make the solution even better by integrating with third-party products. So we've been doing a lot of demo videos. So we've been posting on the community about the integration of our BloxOne cloud solution with third-party reporting tools from Splunk and others. And so, we definitely drive the generation of content that we feel is valuable to our community members, and then we post that.
Well, like you mentioned, sometimes the community members are actually even posting their own concepts or their own ideas to drive a conversation because they're hoping to learn something. But your the blogs that you drive and the webinars you drive, while you give it some examples on the product side, I also want to highlight that there's a lot that is also more best practice side. It's the kind of thing that people would use just to just up their game, even if they're not a Infoblox customer. They can learn things out of those, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just product specific. We definitely have a lot of generic industry topics around networking and security that there are discussions about and webinars about, for sure.
And then on the product specific, it's not Infoblox product specific. This is one of the things that I thought pretty cool, because a lot of companies out there will say, oh yeah, we can integrate with everybody, and I remember actually talking to analysts at Gartner and Forrester, both brought this up. IDC kind of mentioned it indirectly, but the analysts say that when a security vendor comes and says, oh yeah, we integrate with other products, they almost roll their eyes, because what most of those vendors do is, oh, we can send information to a SIM, and oh yeah, we can send an alert to like some sort of a ticket manager, like a ServiceNow or something like that. But that's the extent of it. But the Infoblox solution does have some pretty tight integrations with a lot of different solutions, everything from endpoint products to SOAR solutions. And there are forums, or I don't know if you call them forums in a community where people are talking about those.
Yeah, that's what we call them.
And so those conversations, those are getting into advice on how to get the most out of somebody else's product that you're trying to use alongside of the Infoblox solution, right?
Yeah, we have discussion boards about our third-party vendor integrations, as well as discussion boards specifically about our products around security and networking. Yeah.
Yeah, I specifically was noticing quite a bit around Splunk, particularly the Splunk Phantom, which, of course, Splunk bought that tool. Splunk's been a SIM for a long time, and of course, again, they obviously were getting at all the data that Infoblox can provide on DNS. But then when they bought their source solution, renamed it to Phantom, and really started pushing that, they're doing a lot of integration. I've noticed a lot of activity around that right now. Is that normal, an ongoing thing, or is that a spike right now in activity?
I'd say it's a normal thing. Yeah, we've been doing integrations for a while now, and we have quite a few partners we integrate with, including Checkpoint's firewalls, Splunk's Phantom product. We integrate with Qualsys, even Palo Alto Networks. So I would say it's a spike. I'd say it's an ongoing thing. What is maybe interesting is adoption will increase over time, right? And so you'll see more and more posts about the third-party integrations.
I imagine that adoption grows as the community members themselves start moving around and seeing things. They come for one thing, and then they uncover other information that's available, and they start getting deeper and deeper into the community. Is that a normal progression?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, one of the reasons like a lot of vendors will create a community is, number one, it offloads tech support, right? Because you mentioned very early on, you got members helping members with problems and providing tips and tricks. But the other reason is that it builds it builds a relationship that they may not have with their salespeople and so forth. How much do you see that in the Infoblox community?
I see quite a bit. The community is at its core a way of bringing people together, and because it's online, it's up 24 hours a day. It's available worldwide, and so especially the people who post a lot and answer a lot, they start to develop relationships, because of all the people on the planet, there's only a small number that are working in the space and can answer the questions that you have. So it's a really powerful tool. And when you have somebody help you with something that you're having a problem with, it's a bonding experience. And so there are lots of relationships that get built online from people who never even meet each other face to face.
I belong to a couple of the other vendor kind of things, and it's always very centralized on that vendor and their products and their functions. But again, the openness of the Infoblox one. Matter of fact, I noticed there's a discussion group around using Palo Alto Next Gen Firewall, which has been a long-term integration partner for Infoblox. Even so, they kind of compete, but they're also integration partners. It's one of those co-opetition things, which most security products are. But also, there's a lot of activity in the checkpoint firewall community or sub discussion, and I noticed them actually. Some of them that are like frustrated with their solution, asking the other ones. So it's like, it has nothing to do with Infoblox. It's just, hey, I'm using this next gen firewall. I'm having these problems. Does anybody else know a solution for it? So it's like the discussions go way beyond what Infoblox would have anything to do with.
Yeah, we have over 1,000 discussion posts a year, and you're discussing not only with Infoblox subject matter experts like our employees, but also a lot of your peers in the industry. And so, at your company, there might be a handful of people who are working in network and security like you. And even if you contact our customer support, they may not be familiar with your exact environment. But when you're in a discussion board with thousands of people who are experts on network and security, it's likely that you'll run into somebody who's familiar with your environment or your question, who can give you some good advice.
Yeah, and that access to peers, I mean, that's one of the things I look for. Even when I go to like a conference and stuff, they might have all the different sessions and the keynotes kind of interesting. But the main value I'm looking for is hearing from others that are working the same problems I am. And I wanted to ask you about the number of discussions. You mentioned how many get generated every year. And in security, I mean, I've mentioned this on the podcast before. I've been here forever almost, it seems. When I got into security, there was only desktop antivirus, and there were for firewalls. That was it. Those are the only two security solutions you could buy. And today, I feel like a doctor that started back in the 1800s when there was just doctors, and you were the doctor. You had to know everything because that's the realm of medicine. But today we have so many specialists, and today you get into the cybersecurity market where it's also just as specialized. You can be extremely knowledgeable in certain areas and not in others, which is where that peer information sharing is going. And so as I was looking through the community and looking at some of the different discussions, again, there were some that were very specific, but it was obvious from some of the questions being asked there. It was somebody that, hey, yeah, I've been in security for 15 years, but I've never had to deal with this before. Has anybody else? I mean, that looked like a pretty common and pretty frequent kind of a question. Would you agree from, as the manager who sees it all? Because there's lots of corners in this community I haven't been able to make it into yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Security these days, it's not about one solution like antivirus. It's about depth and defense, right? You have lots of solutions. You have firewalls, antivirus, and what Infoblox focuses on specifically is DNS protection. It's a way that data can be exfiltrated across the DNS channel. And so in the community, we have 25,000 registered members. We have over 300,000 blog views a year. And as I mentioned earlier, over 1,000 discussion posts a year. So there's a lot of engagement, a lot of activity. You have access to almost any kind of security expert, on the planet, essentially. And as you mentioned, it's more about just antivirus. Security now covers many, many domains.
Well, and you also mentioned on the planet. This is a global community too. I mean, Infoblox has been, basically a Fortune 500, mainstay just from the networking stability and reliability standpoint. Everybody, has pretty much Infoblox as a foundational part of their networks, and it's global. So the members, you see a lot of international activity out there.
We do, yeah. It is worldwide. Most of the activity is in the U.S. We have a lot of activity in Europe. That's probably the next region that produces the most volume, and then all of Asia. So yeah, it's totally worldwide.
Yeah, I saw a lot of activity out of India when I was there, which is particularly important for our podcast audience. I'd say a good portion of our listeners are actually from that region, if not from India specifically. We've got 16 countries that people listen to the podcast from on a regular basis. But the last thing I wanted to get into, and you kind of were talking about this, where you've got all those experts who've been doing security for a long time, and they've got different experience at you, and they start sharing it. So the best practice kind of information that's out there, how much is, I imagine it was all very product specific when you first joined and started running the community. How well is the best practice and the higher level kind of conversations, how have those evolved over the years?
So yeah, I would say that they've gone from being more about DNS, which is our focus, to broader topics. And so every year there's something new trending in the industry, whether it's the networking industry or the security industry. You have the migration to the cloud, for example. So we have a lot of posts about the cloud and cloud migrations and how people are using the cloud. And beyond that, you have a lot more happening in the security space. A lot of ransomware attacks, nation state attacks, financial institution attacks. And so you have a lot more kind of higher level discussions about what's happening in those two industries.
Yeah, I did see a lot around the Ukraine war and nation state risks, which has come up dramatically. Now, unfortunately, we are kind of running a little bit short here on time, coming up to the end, but I wanted to ask you if you could wrap up, because you mentioned the readers, and so if people don't want to participate, they can just use the forums and come and get the information from the discussion groups, and a lot of it shows up in Google searches and so forth. But to get the most out of the community, what would be your advice if somebody's going to join not just our community, but any community? What are some of your advice on how to get the most out of that?
Yeah, so I definitely recommend that you register to become a member of a community site, because that way you can participate in the discussion posts. So if you're not registered, you can read the posts, but if you're a registered member, you'll be assigned a username to identify yourself. It's a generic name, it's not your full name, and we never share private information. So you can be as anonymous as you want to be, but if you register, you're allowed to post and allowed to reply to posts, and that's where I think you get the most value out of being a member of a community. But even if you're not registered, you can still read all the blogs and all the posts. So just going to the community and seeing if there's anything that interests you is the most important step. You can go to the Infoblox community. It's at community.infoblox.com, and there's a join the community button in the top right.
Now, I imagine that by joining, that also means that while you're not getting, it's not scraped for marketing purposes.
That's right.
Make people understand that the community is kind of a sacrosanct group here that, and most vendors have that policy as well. They do treat communities with a little more marketing respect. But by registering, you also get notified of those special kind of events like the webinars, and when I do know that you've even promoted to the community when some new third-party research, something from the SANS Institute or something from Gartner comes out, or Forrester that's relevant, you've promoted that to the group as well, right?
That's right. Yeah, in our general announcements section, and people can subscribe to that, so they'll get notified.
Right. So it's, again, another thing that's optional. You kind of pick how much you want to be engaged in the community or not. So Any final thoughts or advice you would give somebody who's, maybe shied away from communities because they don't want to join yet one more group?
Yeah, I would just tell you that there is a lot of great content in our community as well as others. And it actually bothers me thinking about all this great content being there and people not taking advantage of it. And not only the content, but also the ability to interact with your peers. It's a great tool. It's actually really enjoyable. I know a lot of people who spend quite a bit of time on it, and people love sharing their expertise. They love learning from seeing about the problems and issues their peers are having. So it's just a great experience overall. I'm especially proud of the blogs on our site. So I tell you, we have really great authors and guest authors. And so I'd highly recommend that you check those out. I read all of them, and I find them all to be really interesting.
And I also, as I was perusing, I noticed that in some of the discussion groups, there were like 2 or sometimes 3 people that were discussing a particular issue. And then I'd find the same 3 people in someplace else, and they were actually calling each other out. They built this relationship. And like the one you were talking about earlier, it's like, well, we've never met, your friend. I've never met this person, but I've met him in a community, and they know people. So I think again that you hit the right point here. The peer connections that you make through it. But I do want to again underscore, we gave a lot of examples because again, this is an Infoblox sponsored podcast. Mostly Infoblox customers are listening to it, and there's a lot of Infoblox information in the community. But there's also a lot of higher level stuff that can benefit you for all of your security, different areas of security that you need to deal with, address, or at least understand. The breadth of information there. That's one of the things that makes this community a little unique. It's not just a vendor troubleshooting, tech support way to get customers to help customers so that we don't have to have you call our support lines and things like that. That's what a lot of vendors do. But the Infoblox one is much more, I would say, full service community. Would that be a good way to capture it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really great resource about what's happening in the networking and security industry.
Well, unfortunately, we are coming kind of to the end of our time here, but I want to thank you for joining us, Sunil.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. I appreciate it. That's something I'm always happy to do, to talk about the community.
Well, I'm sure we'll have you back. And I would like to thank all of our viewers and listeners for your time as well. And please join us next time as we continue our efforts to help you stay on top of cybersecurity and ahead of cyber risks on Threat Talk.